Hello guys and welcome back to my channel. For those of you who are new here, hi, my name is Bongi and thank you so much for tuning into True Crime with Bongi. On today's video, we're going to be looking into the bizarre case of Lionel Tate. But before I get into it, I have to make my usual disclaimer that I mean absolutely no disrespect to anybody that I'm going to be talking about in this video and all the families that were and are affected by this case. This video is purely for educational purposes and all the information was gotten off of the internet and simply compiled into one video. And now let's get right into it. Lionel Tate was born on the 30th of January 1987 in Illinois, which is a Midwestern state bordering Indiana and Mississippi River, and he was born to parents Kathleen Grosset Tate and John Tate. His parents were married and they both served in the military. However, soon after Lionel was born, I guess they started having some marital problems, which eventually led to a divorce. As a result of the divorce, Kathleen got the primary custody of Lionel. Kathleen would change careers up a lot, and this meant that she would have to leave Lionel with relatives, and sometimes she would leave Lionel with relatives for long stretches of time. At the time, Lionel was doing pretty well in school. He was considered to be a smart student. However, teachers did realize that Lionel was constantly begging for their attention. He would do certain things that just showed the teachers that this kid was really seeking attention. In the early 1990s, Kathleen and Lionel moved to Fort Lauderdale, which is a city on the southeastern coast of Florida, and this is where Lionel started showing some signs of disruptive behavior in school. He started bullying other kids. He would steal their crayons, toys, and stuff like that, and other kids really didn't want to sit next to him or even play with him because he was such a bully, you know. When Lionel was 9 years old, his mother began studying to become a Florida Highway Patrol officer, and so to make time for her studies, she had to send Lionel away to live with relatives in Mississippi. He went back to stay with his mother about a year later, but by this time Kathleen was working long hours as a Florida state trooper. But her schedule wasn't the only thing that had changed, because Lionel himself had also changed. He had put on some weight and had actually become bigger than other kids his age. According to his teachers, Lionel would use his size to bully his classmates, and so other students wouldn't sit next to him as they were afraid that he would either steal their things or use his size to intimidate them. When the teachers told Kathleen about Lionel's aggressive behavior, she would refuse to believe that Lionel was at fault, and when the teachers tried to discipline him themselves, Kathleen would come to school to protest, and sometimes she would come wearing her Florida State Trooper uniform, you know, obviously to intimidate the teachers. In June of 1999, Lionel was a 12-year-old loner. Because he bullied other kids, he basically had no friends. Around this time, Kathleen had also renewed her friendship with an old family friend, Tiffany Unik, who had a 6-year-old daughter called Tiffany Unik. Kathleen and Louise would soon start helping each other out by babysitting each other's children, and their children would become friends because they spent so much time together. On the 28th of July 1999, Kathleen went over to Louise's house to pick up Tiffany to watch her for the night. Unfortunately, this would be the last time that Louise saw her daughter alive. At around 10 p.m. that night, the police in Fort Lauderdale received a frantic 911 call from Kathleen Grosset Tate. She told them that 6-year-old Tiffany Unik was lying on her living room floor, wasn't breathing, and had no pulse. She was trying to revive Tiffany while on the line with the dispatcher, and she kept on screaming that she was cold. A few minutes later, paramedics arrived at the scene and they tried performing CPR on Tiffany as they took her to the hospital, where she was pronounced dead on arrival. At around 11 p.m., Kathleen called Louise, asking if Tiffany had asthma. Louise was shocked and confused, and she asked her why she was asking. That's when Kathleen told her that Tiffany had stopped breathing and then hung up the phone. The sheriff's office immediately began an investigation, as per usual in cases involving a child's death. So they went to Kathleen's house to question her and her son Lionel. Kathleen told them that she made dinner for herself and the children at around 7 p.m. and after that she went upstairs to sleep while the children were playing downstairs. Lionel then told the police that after his mother went upstairs, Tiffany started complaining about a stomach ache and then went to the bathroom to vomit and then came to the living room again to lay down. After a while, he realized that she wasn't breathing, and that's when he went upstairs to inform his mother, who then called 911. So the police at this point just thought that Tiffany had probably choked or eaten something that she was allergic to, and they didn't suspect foul play. The following day, a medical examiner performed an autopsy on Tiffany and found that the 48-pound 6-year-old had actually sustained more than 35 injuries, including brain hemorrhage, a cracked skull, a fractured rib, and a lacerated liver. Part of her liver was actually loose and floating free inside her body, and some of her brain was flattened inside her head while some of it was swollen. Her cause of death was listed as blunt force trauma. According to the medical examiner, the injuries were so severe that they could have only been inflicted intentionally. So at this point, it was pretty clear to the investigators that Tiffany hadn't died of natural causes. Her death was therefore ruled a homicide, and the case was now under a murder investigation. So the police then went back to question Kathleen and Lionel again. While they failed to locate Kathleen, they did find Lionel at a relative's place. And I guess Florida law does allow for a minor to be questioned or interrogated by the police without the guardian's consent. So Lionel was taken into the police station for questioning. Lionel told the police that he and Tiffany had been playing tag together. Mind you, he weighed 170 pounds at the time, so the police looked at him and just thought that he may have caused Tiffany's injuries somehow, so they began tape recording the conversation. He said that he came up behind Tiffany and squeezed her tightly. Tiffany yelled in pain and he immediately let her go. She then placed her hand on her right side, which is the side that is consistent with her injuries. He wasn't really giving the police much, but they kept on pressing him for more details. He then said that at some point Tiffany hit her leg on the staircase and then went to the bathroom to vomit. When she got back, she said that she was tired and wanted to lay down, and she got on the sofa and went to sleep. He then saw that her head was twisted and he tried to move her, and that's when she struck her head on the coffee table. Tiffany yelled in pain, and that's when Kathleen woke up and went downstairs. At this point, it was clear to the investigators that Lionel had somehow caused Tiffany's death and was now trying to come up with a different story to make it seem like that wasn't the case. Later that night, the police managed to locate Kathleen, who came to the police station to be questioned. She said that she was napping upstairs while the kids were playing downstairs. She was woken up by Tiffany's yelling, and she went downstairs to ask Lionel why Tiffany was making that noise. Lionel said that it's Tiffany, she's sleeping and she's making noises like a baby, and so Kathleen just told Tiffany to stop, and the noise stopped. When the police asked Lionel why he didn't tell his mother that Tiffany was hurt, he said that he was scared. Now the investigators were convinced that Lionel had deliberately injured Tiffany and was now trying to conceal the truth. That same night, 12-year-old Lionel Tate was arrested for the murder of 6-year-old Tiffany Unik. Soon after Lionel's arrest, attorney Jim Lewis was hired to represent him. Jim was convinced that Tiffany's death was an accident and that Lionel's story was the truth. However, the police were convinced that it wasn't. After reviewing the case, an assistant state attorney, Ken Pedowitz, decided that Tiffany's murder or death was brutal enough to warrant prosecution in the adult criminal court system. Trying him in a juvenile court system meant that he would probably get somewhere between 6 and 9 months in prison, and that wasn't equivalent to the crime committed or the brutality of it. So basically, no justice would have been served. So on the 11th of August 1999, Lionel Tate was charged with first-degree murder, and he was one of the youngest people to be charged with such a serious crime that had such serious consequences. If he was found guilty, he would face the mandatory sentence of life imprisonment, and he would be the youngest person to receive the life sentence. His indictment shocked many people, including his attorney Jim Lewis, because at the time Lionel was the youngest person to be charged with first-degree murder as an adult. But the brutality of Tiffany's beatings was also shocking, and people were literally being pulled into two different directions. They didn't know what to think because On the one side, you have a 6-year-old that's been murdered so brutally, and on the other side, you have a 12-year-old boy that's responsible for the murder of this 6-year-old girl. You don't know whether this boy understood the consequences of his actions or fully understood what it is that he was doing at the time, you know. And in as much as I think trying him in a juvenile court system would have been too lenient, I also think that trying him as an adult was a little too harsh. So I really don't know what to think. If I were to pick one side, I don't know which side that would I choose, you know. So anyways, to defend Lionel, Jim came up with the defense that Lionel killed Tiffany while imitating the moves of professional wrestlers as he had seen on TV. He even started appearing on TV to make his case public, and this obviously shifted people's attention from Lionel to the wrestling sport, blaming professional wrestlers or the wrestling sport for Tiffany's death instead of Lionel. Jim also provided the media with a tape-recorded interview where Lionel had went back to the scene and was basically reenacting the events that took place on that night. He was basically trying to build his case by convincing the public that Lionel had killed Tiffany accidentally while innocently imitating the moves of professional wrestlers. However, Lionel had made no mention of wrestling in his initial statement made to the police. The prosecutors approached the defense attorney with a plea deal. The condition was that Lionel had to plead guilty to second-degree murder, and he would be given a lesser sentence. He would get to spend 3 years of that sentence at a juvenile facility. Everyone thought that the plea deal was pretty fair considering that Lionel was facing such a huge charge, and they were convinced that the defense would accept the plea deal. However, Kathleen shocked everyone when he declined the plea deal, claiming that his son was completely innocent and wouldn't plead guilty to something that he didn't do. What she was failing to understand was that the prosecutors were sure that Lionel didn't accidentally injure Tiffany, and they had evidence to support that. But despite that, they kept on offering them a plea deal multiple times, and the defense kept on rejecting it time and time again until it was finally time for Lionel to stand trial. The trial began on the 13th of January 2001, and Lionel was 13 at the time. Prosecutor Ken Pedowitz opened for the state. He began by explaining to the jury how Lionel, who was 170 pounds at the time of the crime, savagely assaulted Tiffany Unik, who weighed 48 pounds at the time of the crime, and how he beat her up with fists and stomping and kicking over the course of 5 minutes while his mother was sleeping upstairs, and ended up causing over 35 injuries to the little girl. The defense, on the other hand, tried to push the same argument that they had been pushing in the press, saying that Tiffany's death was the unintended result of a wrestling accident. The state's first witness was Tiffany's mother, Tiffany Unik, who told the court how she was a single mother raising her child on her own, and how she had a really tight bond with her daughter. She also told them about the odd conversation that she had with Lionel a day after Tiffany's death. So Lionel asked Dewey's if he could have Tiffany's toys, and if he could also move in with her now since Tiffany wasn't going to be coming home. This made people believe that this may have been Lionel's reason for killing Tiffany. He may have envied the relationship that Tiffany had with her mother and wanted that for himself, since he didn't have a close relationship with his mother. The following day, the videotape of Lionel reenacting the events of that night was pulled out and brought forth for evaluation. The prosecution said that Lionel's wrestling story didn't align with Tiffany's injuries. The injuries were simply too severe to have been inflicted accidentally. They also mentioned that Lionel had made no mention of the wrestling story in any of the details in the videotape in his initial statement made to the police. But the defense stuck with their story, and they kept trying to sell it, even though the judge had tried to limit the use of the wrestling defense during the pre-trial. On the 23rd of January 2001, the defense called its final witness to the stand, and that was Lionel Tate's mother, Kathleen Tate, who described to the court how she discovered the little girl's nearly lifeless body called 911, and even performed CPR on her while waiting for the ambulance to arrive. The trial ended on the 25th of January, and it was now time for the jurors to deliberate. After 3 hours of deliberation, the jury returned with a verdict. They found Lionel Tate guilty of first-degree murder, and on the 9th of March, Lionel Tate was sentenced to life in prison. He was the youngest person to receive a life sentence at the time, and so this sentence shocked everybody, including the prosecutors. After his sentencing, Lionel was taken to an adult prison in Miami, and 3 days later he was transferred to a juvenile facility. A different attorney was hired for Lionel's sentence appeal, and their appeal was on the ground that 13-year-old Lionel was just not competent to stand trial as an adult. In September of 2003, the case was appealed, and 3 months later, the court handed down its ruling. Lionel's competency hadn't been evaluated before trial, and so he was given a new trial. The prosecutors gave him a plea deal again to avoid a long and extensive trial. The conditions was that he should plead guilty to second-degree murder in exchange for the 3 years that he had already spent in prison, 1 year house arrest, and 10 years probation. And this time he accepted the offer. And on the 26th of January 2004, he was released from prison. Only 8 months later, Lionel was arrested for violating the conditions of his plea bargain when he was found a few blocks from his house at 2 a.m. walking around with a 4-inch knife. On October 29th, the Associated Press reported that Lionel had been placed in a zero-tolerance probation for an additional 5 years. On November 30th, he was sent back to his mother because the family that he was staying with was complaining that the frequent visit from the probation officer was too stressful. In May of 2005, Lionel was arrested yet again and charged with burglary with battery, armed robbery, and violation of probation. He had robbed a Domino's pizza delivery man of 4 pizzas worth $33 at gunpoint, and so he was arrested, but no gun was recovered. He admitted that he had violated his probation by being in possession of a gun during a robbery for 4 pizzas worth $33.60. Although he had admitted to being in possession of a gun, he refused to tell the police where he had acquired the gun and where he later disposed of it. He was later allowed to withdraw his guilty plea for the robbery, but he was sentenced to 30 years for the gun possession. On February 19th, 2008, he pled no contest to the pizza robbery charge, and he was sentenced to 10 years. The 10-year sentence will run concurrently with the 30-year sentence. And that brings us to the end of today's case. If you enjoyed this video or you found it informative, please don't forget to hit the thumbs up button, and also comment down below what it is that you thought about this case, and leave your case suggestions while you're at it. And if you haven't already, please subscribe to my channel and also turn on your post notifications so that you don't miss out on any of my future uploads. And that's it from me. I'll see you guys next week. Bye.